Nige,
James.
nice to be seeing you. How you been keeping?
Good, thanks.
Good.
Yeah, good.
So, last time we had you in here, it was nice because we had a little introduction into Nigel Sharp, and thanks to all the viewers as well, because we got some really good ratings on that and people really enjoyed it. We left off last time, like I say, a little introduction to yourself. You'd been fishing Frimley, and then you moved on to Match Lake, and that's what we're going to talk today is about Match and Cops, and then obviously you go over the other side of the road, but that'll be another chapter.
Yeah.
So, just quickly, how have you been since we last saw you?
I've been alright, pretty good.
Much fishing?
Done a little bit of fishing, It's just short sessions really, because that's all we're allowed to do. Been alright, catching
just
the odd
nice
one.
to get out, because we had a nice little heat wave, or not a heat wave, but we were nice and mild not long back, didn't it? It was quite nice.
Yeah, we had a bit of early spring, didn't we?
And you
Sort of
got
a
you had a
taster,
one, didn't you?
Yeah, I've had a couple of fish, so yeah, it's been alright.
Good. Okie dokie. So, right, let's get straight on to Match Lake. Now, you'd been fishing Frimley, and as you said in the last episode, that it was time to sort of migrate over to Match Lake. You wanted that challenge.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is going to very quickly bring up a picture of the Match Lake right there. So one interesting thing, actually, I did read through your book, is when you was fishing Frimley, there was like a little deal between bailiffs where you could fish other waters.
Yeah, I believe the controlling club at the time was called Leisure Sport Angling, and anyone who's a Leisure Sport Angling bailiff could fish any of their waters really. So yeah, it was a little bit of a trade-off sort of thing, So.
But roughly when the time you decided to go and fish it all changed, didn't it?
Yeah, I just assumed that I could go and fish the Yateley Complex on my bailiff ticket from Frimley, and like the Yateley bailiffs would come over to Frimley and night fish, which Frimley is a no night fishing venue, and it's only bailiffs allowed to night fish at the time. So so I went over there and just thought I'd carry on as usual, but I soon found out differently.
Pulled the plug on you. And just quickly as well, we're going back. So when was it? What year was it you went on to the match?
That would have been 93, yeah.
93, okay.
Yeah.
And how much did you pay for your Yateley ticket?
For my Yateley ticket back then, I believe I paid 25 quid.
That's crazy, isn't it?
That's for a complex of lakes, not for a lake.
Jesus Christ. I mean, it's probably, God knows how much more than that.
Yeah, I think there's on the Yateley Complex, people correct me if I'm wrong, I suppose. I imagine there was probably a dozen lakes, but 6 main ones really, with a Match, Cops, Nursery, and on the other side of the road you had the Carp, North and Pads Lakes. You've sort of 6 main ones, and Split Lake, Pump House, and other ones sort of filled in, like Summer Pit and all that lot. So
it was just
a good ticket for 25 quid.
Yeah, and there was a hell of a lot of years worth of fishing on there for you as well.
Well, realistically a lifetime's worth of fishing, but
and each lake had its own challenge in a way, the way it was.
Every lake was a bit similar to Frimley. All the lakes were dug slightly different to each other, I mean, if you look at all of that sort of group of Yateley lakes, you include tri-lakes as well. So just say the Match Lake side of the road, because that's what we're talking about. I'd say the tri-lakes, the Cops Lake and the Nursery, if you look at all of them 3 lakes, they all look like they're very similarly dug, like small dotty islands, snaggy bays, quite sculptured lakes, like shallow features in them as well. The Match Lake's dug different, like sort of in the middle of them 3 lakes, or maximum extraction. Possibly, I might be wrong, but I would say it was probably the last of those lakes to be dug. Obviously, the tri-lakes had a fence between it as someone else's land. Colin, I believe, owned that or something at the time. But you could see how each of the lakes were dug. I mean, Sandhurst at the back of the Cops is dug slightly different as well. But I think maximum extraction of Match Lake, it's a bit deeper, typical Blackwater Valley, more modern gravel pit really. They take it down to the clay scene or where the gravel runs out, and that's it. Take it all out. They don't leave anything in there. I think some of the old lakes, they tip byproducts in as well that they're not going to use, which form some of the shallow bars, but I think as time went on, they sort of keep some of them products. Garden centres buy them and things like that, don't they? So, but it's like that's just that side of the road. Then you go over the car park and the North Lake and Split Lake and Pad Lake. They're all different, dug differently.
So is they're well sort of matured lakes. I mean, we're looking at the Match Lake now up on the screen there. Just run us through the lake, the size of it. You've got 3 islands on there. Like I say, you can see plenty of little bays and that they get into.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice shaped lake. I believe a southwesterly wind used to almost hit 2 bays, which I'd call a 48's bay, which is in the top right hand corner. and you used to get a bit of ripple up into, like, you know, the where Lazy Man's Bay is there, mangrove, like a southerly southwesterly wind, I think used to hit both them. And so it's a bit of, you wouldn't go to one end of the lake if wind was blowing there, is it, in two areas, so it's quite good, you know.
And what's the size of that lake in acres? How many acres is that roughly?
Do you know what? I don't actually know, but it's a decent sized lake, I'd say. I would say it's probably about 15, 16 acres.
Oh, really?
Okay,
So it's actually bigger than what I thought. I was going around sort of 9, 10
back
acres.
in the day, we didn't have wheelbarrows, so if you had to carry your gear around it, you know, it was hard work.
Yeah.
You know, even being a bit younger as well, you know. Yeah, especially with the old Yateley mud. I mean, these days I think it's a bit more manicured with hard paths and everything. Different club runs it now, but yeah, it's hard work getting your gear around that.
Yeah. So, okay, so you've like I say, you was dangling on Friendly for a little while. You was off the shoulders. That didn't go to plan, did it?
No.
But then you went straight over to the match lake because you wanted that challenge. You had some friends that were fishing. Let's just put this into context. So, I can't remember the name of the guy that you had spoken to about the match lake, but on average per season, you was looking at getting 2 to 3. If you got 2 to 3 fish out of here, you've done all right. You've done average.
That was like a good year, I suppose. You know, on an average angler, if he caught 2 or 3 fish out of the match lake, he'd done well. Like,
you've done all right.
You know,
okay.
He wouldn't be complaining, sort of thing. You know, plenty of people struggled, like, you know, to catch. I mean, I think, if memory serves me right, Alan Cooper, you know, he was one of the youngsters over there at the time, but he actually put an album together, and I think it was locally known in the Munchkins as like the Bible sort of thing. Yeah. And he had pretty much every one of the match lake mirrors in there, and I think, you know, again, he might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was about 40 different mirrors in there.
Right, okay. And so what was the amount of fish in that lake in total, roughly?
I don't think there's a lot more than that, because commons, there wasn't a lot of commons in the match lake, you know.
Okay.
I mean, these days they fish for the red mirrors in there, and that, but they're later stops. They were stopped sort of at the time I was finishing up over on the complex. And
there was cats in there as well. I do mention.
The catfish I think were stocked between 92 and 93. Like, there was a batch of them put in. I think they were 6 to 7 pounds. Like, those all tattooed dots.
Was there any reason they put them in there?
I don't really know the reason
down
behind them
or something, or
I don't know.
They just ended up in there, basically.
Yeah, there was a policy to put them in there. I think the Split Lake got some as well, which is on the other side of the road. They were the 2 lakes, but they're invasive, aren't they, catfish? They seem to get spread around the venue eventually.
They do, got a habit of doing it. So, okay, so you know, first time you walk on there, the lake's laying in front of you. What was your approach in your head? I mean, you know, you've never really sort of fished somewhere like this, or similar lakes in Frimley, obviously, but you know, you've walked on there, you know that you're looking at 2 or 3 fish a season. So what was your approach?
Well, it's my first sort of session on the match lake. It was more social with my mate Glenn. He sort of started, he was keen to fish it, and I thought I'd join him. I actually preferred the tougher waters on the other side of the road, but I thought I'd have a social on there with him and
get yourself warmed up.
And he was on what you call the up your bum swims. Like,
I don't want to know what that's got to be.
Well, I'm sure someone could enlighten you. I think that's probably the late Jeff Pink was something to do with naming.
Right, okay.
But Glenn was in one of them swims, and I just ended up on the end of that point, which was the mouth of the jungle. I thought it was good in that area. Fish were always in.
Is that opposite mangrove there?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I sort of sat up there, and you know, more sociable. It's a good view up the lake from there, and I thought, give it a go. There's fish in and out of the jungle, so just stuck with rigs that I knew that was doing well for me, like little liners, Dacron hook links and that, small leads, small running leads. That's something I was into at the time.
And had that been something that had done well for you on Frimley, and you thought, you know what, I've got confidence in that rig, I'm going to take this straight back over, stick with what you know.
Stuck to that all the way through me fishing, really. So.
And what was the, like, let's go through the bottom of the lake as well, you know, what was it, a lot of bars, weedy, gravelly?
At the time I fished it, most of the match lakes, like I said earlier, is maximum extraction. There's not a lot to it feature-wise. Yeah. There's little gravel scenes and, you know, very few major features in there other than islands. Weed bed, very few. There's a little bit of weed up in the 48's Bay and around the front of the mangrove. It's a pretty barren lake, really.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it's more about, you know, if you found any little features on the bottom or bushes really around the edges, the Yateley bush, as people say, you know, these days.
So you, because I've read that chapter and got into the cops there a little bit, and you, You caught nigh on, I think, on your second trip, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right.
And that must have made some people think, Christ, well, this young lad's just come on here. Maybe it was a fluke, but you didn't. You continued to catch all the way through that season and ended up with a total of...
I think I end up 15 fish out of there.
That's going some.
Yeah, it's good going.
And that opened up a lot of eyes. Now, we're going to go through some of them pictures of them fish a little bit towards the end of the match lake that we got. And we've got a few photos on there as well. So, tactics, like I say, it was fairly straightforward just on the running rigs.
Yeah,
go through your rig setup with us, because I know you've got a rig there. And
I mean, that was a rig I used on the Cops Lake to catch one of the big ones out of there, a little adaptation.
And it's a straightforward rig,
watching
isn't it?
the fish feed is not a lot different, but the main, I think at the time I favoured it was a size 4 super specialist.
Yeah,
I think you get 10 hooks for 85p a pack back then. You're pretty lucky to buy one hook for that these days. Oops. But yeah, little, I think you used to use silicone tubing, thick walled 0.75.
Yeah.
Right, and the in rig at the time was a liner, sort of like a Dacron. You tie your hook on as normal, thread it through the eye, like for your hair, like tie your hair sort of thing. But there was a few like key points of exactly the right length of tube and where you tied, your bait would sit and everything. It's just basically like drag over your hand, flip over setup really. It's obviously been modernised these days with shrink tube. I mean, going back then, people didn't use shrink tube on rigs. It's, the 0.75 thick walled tubing was strong. It could take a cast with a string.
Well, you've only got to feel that
like
on that actual rig you've got there from back then, obviously. You can feel how stiff it is, and it's almost like solid material on there, isn't it? But it done the job. I think sometimes you look at rigs, how they've come on, and don't get me wrong, they're fantastic. I'm not knocking them, but it just shows you sometimes you go back to basics. They all catch. And you mainly caught on bottom baits, and you had more success, or was it the bigger fish? I think you're saying you caught better with bottom baits.
I seem to catch the bigger fish on the bottom baits on the match lake for some reason. I don't know why that was or anything. I think it worked out about 50-50. Because I always fish one rod on the pop up, one rod on the bottom bait.
Yep.
Very similar setups both, but for some reason the bottom bait sorted out the bigger fish. But also, in hindsight, later in the year, spots were worked or cleared off better, so bottom baits tend to perform better. And
it was boilie as well, mainly.
Boilie fishing. That's all I was doing really. I mean, I did when I first turned up on the match lake, I was using a mixture of hemp and I think moth beans. They seem to complement each other quite well in a particle mix, and using a catapult to put them out. They both went out the same distance rather than mixing hemp with tigers or something. Tigers go a bit further, didn't they? We didn't really use spods or spont. That was a long time after sort of thing.
And there was no wrapping up. A lot when I was reading your
wrapping up.
It was all.
I mean, well, we'll probably get onto me setup later, but the reels I used, they didn't even have line clips on them. You cast by eye.
Because it was casting to the marker float then, wasn't it?
You put a marker, you have a drag about, feel your spot, mark it in your own mind with reflections on the water or tree lines, pop your float up, and then you just cast as close as you could to the marker float, which could always be fun. And I mean, back then as well, we weren't even using braid on marker rods. It's like nylon, so it's.
And you don't see markers used much nowadays either, do you? And a lot of people are always feeling for the drop and don't bother with the markers anymore. And I still, for me, you can't be feeling that drop with a marker rod and checking depths and coming back and checking depths again. And
even leading about, people these days just lead about with a braided rod, find a spot, clip it up, wrap their
and put it on
rig rod on, put it on it, which is all good if you're using a spawn. But if you want to use a catapult and boilies, you've got to judge it by eye where it is. And something I've done in more recent years is to put the marker float on the rod after, on the leading rod after when I'm catapulting boilies out to make sure I'm getting them accurate again. And I had a good year a couple of years ago doing that. I think I had that year where I had 5 fish over 45 pound or something.
Good going.
But that was sort of going back to some old ways for a little bit more accuracy, So,
So when you fished there, it wasn't distance fishing at all. Then you was mainly sticking on margins. Most
of it was within catapult range, all of it was within catapult range, which you're talking 60 yards maximum, isn't it? So, the shape of the match lake, there's not really any real long distance swims. I'd say Probably the big beach out to the back of the Gulf Tees Island was probably one of the longest casts, which is right off the top bank out there to the back of the snags.
So sort of here, you're casting from Gulf Tees Island to the back of...
No, if you go north of that, see the beach up there next to the NF.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm with you, yeah.
Casting to the back of the Gulf Tees Island.
Right,
that'd be probably one of your longer casts.
Okay, and like I say, we'll look at your setup in a minute because we got some pictures of that, and I like talking about the way things were used back then to the technology you got nowadays, but we're going to see some pictures of those in a minute. Bait, one thing you said about baiting there I found really interesting. Every morning you'd have your routine, you'd get up in the morning, you'd make your boilie, so you were making bait on the bank.
Yeah.
So run us through your what you were doing, your mixes.
Well, I was using a fish meal base mix. I started off using one, I think it was a Cotswold baits at the time, one called Spice Marine, really good bait. I think a friend of mine, Jim Walker, had something to do with development of it. Some Nash flavours like lobster thermidor, bit of salmon oil. Nothing too mad, like a decent fish meal food bait doesn't need flavours or anything, but I just like that concoction, fish meals with a bit of oil in it and a little bit of a smell. It worked well. I was catching on that, but that base mix become quite hard to get hold of. I don't know if there's something going on with Cotswold baits at the time or whatever, but I sort of moved on to using Premier fish meals and got as close as I could with it, mixing fish base mix with spice. I think it's spiced fish base mix or something at the time. Very similar, like just Robin Red really sort of type base mix, and same flavours. But yeah, every morning get up, maybe photograph a fish if I had one in a bag, or have some breakfast and then start making bait, cracking eggs and mixing it up. Was like, yes, I'd roll half of them with a rolling table, 14mm rolling table, Gardner one. Little plug
which
there.
we still sell loads of now. Lovely little plug there. Yes.
Get them while
a lot of them.
And I rolled the rest by hand, and I deliberately wanted them to. I didn't want them all the same size, so they'd all weigh exactly the same. So I wanted different sizes bait, so the fish wouldn't get familiar. Used to picking up certain weights, and they could detect which one had the hook in it. So, there's a little bit of a method to it. If it was raining, it was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I do remember saying you had some big floods down there, and actually that river burst its banks on that occasion.
That was later in the year when I caught drop scale on my first 30. But sometimes you'd be rolling bait and you got to dry out, hadn't you?
Yeah. I remember you saying you put it on your sleeping bag
and
pretty much
bag and a bivvy, proper bank tramp style,
So what time was you doing on there? So at that time you was signing on.
At that time I was
and
unemployed
using rented
for a
accommodation
reason.
or something then as well, wasn't
you?
So
I was lodging around a mate's house, and I was actually signed on. Reason why I wasn't working was I was declared unemployable. But that was due to
because you'd done a computer course or something,
and
I did giggle, and you apparently, sorry to interrupt you got through doing the computer course, and then it come up at the end you're unemployed or something.
The only job that fitted for what I put into this computer said that I could be a courier driver, but at the time the reason why I was unemployed was because I had I think 14 points on my licence, 2 of them running concurrently.
So you was a bit of a boy racer, knowledge.
Well, a few,
or just a bad driver.
And I was lucky enough to keep my licence with 14 points on. Two run concurrently, because at the time I needed my licence to keep my job. So it's a sort of long story, but obviously I didn't keep my job. But I was declared. Well, I went on a course because they try and get you back into work. That's what happens when you're claiming benefits. They want you to be actively seeking work, and after a certain amount of time, they put me on this course, and that was sitting there in front of the computer, and it told me I could do courier work, but I couldn't because no one would employ someone with that sort of a licence. So basically for a year or so I couldn't work.
It was like back down the lake again then.
Well, it was lovely, but
So what sort of time was you doing on there? You was arriving there because I know you mentioned something about you had the weeknight just and going to work the next morning sort of guys down there as well. So I
was fishing pretty much. I'd go down on a Monday and go home on a Friday.
So you was doing the 4-5 nights over there? Just
I was doing that most weeks.
So when you're young like that, your back put up with it?
Yeah, it was in my sort of 20s back then, and it was a nice year. The time goes quick though when you think about it. like back then there was a closed season as well, and I started fishing the match lake probably in July.
Oh, so you didn't go
July,
straight over
August,
there
September. By the time you know it, within 16 weeks you're in October, aren't you?
Yeah.
Looking at a winter, so basically looking at 16 trips. So
okay, that's it's quite a bit of fishing, shall we say? But like I say, you've done really well. So the other anglers, I know that when you first went in, like I say, you caught immediately, and the vibe was quite nice because reading through your book, a lot of the anglers, I think you said in there, you felt like you was accepted, and you was then part of the clique down there, and they were some really nice guys down there.
Yeah, I mean, Yateley was somewhere you'll never see again. I went over there keeping myself to myself. Old trick that an old Yateley angler, Rob McGill, told me is if you don't want people in your swim, just put a long guy rope off the back of your bivvy across the entrance to the swim.
Yeah,
and you'd be surprised, like a little bit of string, paracord or whatever across the back of the swim, and I've stopped a lot of people coming in your swim, like, and I took note of that, and that's what I did. I wasn't doing it to be unsociable, it's just I wanted to keep myself to myself. But yeah, my first session I caught a tench, second session I caught my first Yateley Carp, which was the orange leather, I think they call it now. I think it's still alive to this day.
So it's an old fish
and
now.
It ended up being the last Yateley Carp I caught sometime later.
Because you had that 26 first, I think.
No, it was £20 an ounce, that fish was. But yeah, and then the following session I came down, and I caught a couple more, like the old fish and a ghosty, but from another swim because someone had a shit and
Sorry, no, you're more than well, because I've got that in on me board. People, and I've had this around the Lee Valley, they've done that for when I was fishing years ago, and people would, what's the word? Defecate in a swim, and that went on quite a bit. Now, do you think that was just someone who needed to dump really quickly, or do you think that was an angler? Thought, if I have a Richard in there, then no one's going to go in there.
I don't know. My first vibe was when I turned up, because I'd caught out that swim the week before, and when I turned up and there was a nice southwesterly blowing in there again, and
someone deliberately, and
I'd caught from that swim, I quite fancy getting back in there.
Yeah.
And when I walked in there and see a turban on the floor, right, well, I didn't like that.
Don't want to be moving that one, do you?
At first you think, someone done that because they're a bit bitter. Because I hadn't really spoke to many Yateley anglers at the time on the match lake. I thought, that happened as a, that will show him sort of thing, or he could be paranoid or whatever. But I wasn't about to clear it up. Like, it's not for me. I just walked further up the bank in the right hand party swim, and in some ways that did do you a favour, didn't it? I could cast to the same spot from the next swim up, and also by leaving that in the swim, no one else is going to go in there and fish on top of it, and obviously it worked in my favour. I could still go down to that swim and catapult the moth beans and emp over with a few boilies on the area, so
keep it ticking.
Yeah, it sort of worked in my favour.
So you mainly sort of concentrated on one or two areas on the lake, or did you pretty much work your way all around it?
Well, I was lucky enough to get in the 48s a few times, or in that area of the lake, and I caught from there. But when it sort of slowed up, once you're regularly fishing a lake like that, and like you just mentioned, which I didn't really answer, was you get accepted. Like when that next session, when I caught the old fish and the ghosty, I met a chap called Jamie Smith, who's still a friend to this day. Like, he engraves kettles and cups and everything else, carpy kettles or whatever. You become a good friend, and then you get to sort of, each time you go down, and no mobile phones or social media, you hear about what happens at the lake when you get to the lake, sort of thing. But you start to get to hear things, or words out. But I started having me on area called the Mangrove,
which is Mangrove. Okay,
that's up here, just in the entrance to sort of Lazy Man's Car Park Bay or whatever. Nice sort of beachy swim. Sort of had my eye on that area, and I think the first time I went in that swim, I managed about 4 fish or something.
I'm reading that.
A couple of classic Yateley Carp, an old history one called Piss Flat.
Of course, we've got a nice photo of that one in a minute. It's a lovely looking fish, actually.
Classic names for swims and fish on there. But
some great names on there.
Good sense of humour. But like I said, I was saying, I slowly started to get to know a few people who get accepted, and I wouldn't say there was a clique of Yateley. There probably was in later years after I'd finished with the place, but it was very good social scene on Yateley, on all the lakes.
Not saying here you'll never get.
If any of the lakes, the match lake was the sort of the start of your
Yeah, centre of it all,
socialising. Because whoever you met on the match lake, as you went off from there around the venue to Cops or the other side of the road, you generally slowly slipped over there with the lads you'd met on the match lake would follow, or they'd be gone over there. It's like the starting point.
So a name that kept popping up in there was Terry the Tench, which I'm taking was obviously Terry.
Yeah, Terry Owen.
And that's where you got to know. Now, you didn't speak to Terry much at first when you was on there, did you?
No, I mean, I was obviously fishing, say, what people would say full-time. So, I'd either be in my bivvy sitting on rods, like Terry was at the time working full-time as a postman, and he'd turn up lunchtime, a little bit later maybe, and he'd just be stalking for the afternoon into dark, and then he'd go home, go to Kip, and then get up, do his post round, and he'd do that day after day after day. Every now and again I'd bump into him walking along the paths and that. Yeah, word was out, Terry was battering both Match and Cops Lake. I mean, that year he done 40 fish between them two lakes, just doing one night a week, like a Saturday night. All his holiday, whatever holiday he had as well.
Down there.
And all them afternoon sessions, like incredible. But I knew who he was as a person on the lake, not as in superstar, because he was just someone who went fishing at the time.
And that's still tell now, isn't it? That's why I have a lot of respect for him. He's never really wanted to be the famous angler or anything like that.
He's just himself.
He's just a fisher hunter type person, isn't he?
But I see him round the lake, said hello as I walk past. I mean, he's a stalking angler. He's short session fishing, one rod, setting traps or floater fishing. You don't want to bother someone who's doing that. No. I wouldn't like it if I was doing it. Someone, all right, mate. Bundling in with your white t-shirt on or something.
Yeah, don't you?
But it wasn't till sort of October I actually, Terry walked in me swimming for a chat, like, and
the beginning of a great relationship.
Yeah, well, friendship, not relationship.
So, hello. I don't know. Is that where the up the bum thing comes? Just talking
before my time.
Just talking about the Yateley thing. You've got a nice t-shirt on for us today as well. Can you just show everybody your t-shirt?
Put it on just for a laugh. Okay. Put it on special.
But really, you
didn't iron it.
It stretched the ironer. But look, let's be honest. You went on there 15 fish in a season, and like it's only from July to September, or was it October? Sorry, about around October, or did you?
Fished into about November time. Yeah,
right. Yeah. And that really has done very well on there. Okay, that's damn good going. So we have got some pictures actually. I've got my projector man over there somewhere.
Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. He's just going to get it up and running on the thing, because, like I say, he's got some of the photos of the fish you caught out. There's some funny ones as well. So if you could just run through each fish.
Funny ones. Now you got me worried.
Well, that's a funny one because it's not a fish, but this was your vehicle. We had to bring it up.
Yeah, vehicle of choice. I think I bought that off a mate, a chap called Trevor King. Actually, I think pretty sure I bought that off him. Just cheap runner, really. Sort of,
got you down the lake.
Well, yeah, it was more a case of days of Golf GTIs and that were long gone with that many points on your licence, and
the insurance was ridiculous on it.
The insurance companies want more money than what the car's worth, so something like that.
So that was the car
runner, yeah.
Right. got you where it needed.
I used to like the number plate on it. I mean, that's probably on someone's Beamer or something now.
And you describe that number plate as
unemployable lazy bum. Right, something like that, yeah, it's a good little motor, that, couple of £100 or something, get me to the lake.
Was this the one that, because going back to the match lake again, I remember the night when you said you was rolling boilies and it was really, really raining. I think you'd been sitting with Jamie Smith or something, it was chucking down with rain. And that night, the river burst its banks at the back and flooded out the car park, didn't it? And apparently you're saying most of the vehicles in the car park were flooding up above the bonnets.
Yeah.
But was this the vehicle that made
that
it through?
car there, in the exact spot it's parked next to, I mean, mate Glenn used to park his old Honda motorbike around the side of it, sort of use it as cover.
Yep.
So his bike didn't get sabotaged. If you see the chain just over the saddle there. But yeah, that's parked right down by the Match Lake Bridge there, which I always seem to get that parking spot. You have your little lucky parking spot, don't you? But for some reason, I think I'd nipped out, and when I come back, someone else had parked there. I can't remember whose car it was. It might have been Big Malcolm Bodybuilders or something like that. Or that might actually be his motor behind me there. But someone had parked there, and so I had to park right up the other end of the match lake car park
So
where the gate is,
done you a
and
favour.
you don't really realise it, but that was slightly higher ground, and the lake. Yeah, that evening I think Jeff Pink come down to visit me. He's having a chat. He actually offered me a deal at the time, to get involved with
Nash bait, wasn't it?
At the time.
Because I think you said there was a flavour or something that you was already using. Obviously, Nash had heard about all this, and you was catching fish, and they wanted to use you.
But it's torrential rain. We sat in a bivvy chatting for hours, and Jeff went, and it just carried on raining all night. I actually, after he'd left, caught my first 30, a fish called drop scale, which you see a picture will come up in a bit of that. But I didn't realise that the lake had flooded that night until I woke up the next morning and just see my rod tip stuck out the water.
And you had a fish in the
18 inches
sack as well, didn't you?
That was drop scales in the sack, and I was more worried about because
I
I couldn't see the pole
pool.
stuck out there. So I was sort of running the lake to make sure it's still there. It was, luckily, but
I think we got a picture of that in a minute.
But luckily, my old escort there was on dry ground at the top of the car park. So if anyone fishes a match lake these days, don't park near the bridge.
Down the bottom of the rain carbon. So this fish here was.
That's my first Yateley fish, the orange leather, caught out of 48.
And that was at £20.
£20 an ounces, yeah.
And really, let's go back. Like I say, this is going back to 93, 94ish. There wasn't the big fish like what you get nowadays. These were 20s with maybe the odd 30 in there.
Yeah.
And
there was two 30s in the match lake back then, and they were like the two main targets: drop scale and Thompson's fish. Okay. And the rest was £20 a sight. Yeah.
So this one, how was this called? Just getting your standard rig that you've got there.
Yeah. Standard rig.
Just on silty patches.
Yeah. It's just literally on a bit of silt at the back of a slight gravel run, 20 yards out, something like that. Little gravel scene that run across the front of the 48s there. Felt like a decent enough place to present the bait. Yeah. Wind was blowing in there.
And I mean, to have that on your second session, you must have thought, crikey, this is the...
I can't remember exactly, but I think I might have lost fish or something. Or it might have been a later session, but I remember catching that about 3:30 in the afternoon. The rod had been out since the day before. So that sort of taught me to keep rods in the water as long as you could and the swim settled, Yeah. But that was a good buzz getting that in the net, because
it's almost like
it's always like, that's it, I've got one.
Now you want to.
I knew when I caught the tench, I thought I can catch carp out of here if I can catch the tench on the rigs. But then that was confirmation the following week. I can catch carp out of match lake, so I was buzzing to get back.
Nice. Okay, next slide, please, sir. Thank you, darling. Wow.
Well, we've mentioned that one already. That was the old fish. That was pretty much one of them fish that anyone who fished the match lake back then caught that fish. I believe, so I'm told, that is original Yateley stock.
Okay.
Like from back in the day of tri lakes and that. Again, I might be wrong. Someone might correct me on this, but the match lake mirror, or mirror cod as a lot of them were referred to, the bald flanked fish, they were a younger fish that was stocked.
Yeah.
But that and another one called piss flap, I think, were the only two old remaining. But again, it was called the old fish because it is old. I mean, my mate's actually got that fish stuffed in a case now. That one. Okay. Yeah, nice old carp.
And again, same sort of scenario, same set up, the same swim almost, or was it?
Well, that was, like I said earlier, someone had taken a dump in the swim.
So this,
48, so I cast down to the same spot from the right hand party and caught that again. 3:00 in the afternoon.
So it was an afternoon bite scenario.
Yeah, but this taught me something with Yateley. Most people sit on their rods midday, wind in, start walking around, socialising, go and watch this chap called Terry go and catch a few off the top. And crack on, lads. I'll just sit here and drink tea and smoke, and maybe I'll catch one this afternoon. But I was probably one of the only people who had rods in the water all afternoon, and I caught quite a lot.
And look what
we will get into that, and like next piece and that. But quite a lot of my Yateley fish come between midday and 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
So it was like the 3:00 rock, and you was
sit on your hands, do your rods a bit later.
Right. So next slide, please. We've got a new employee doing this for us. Now look, these are the ones I love. So this is, what swims is this?
That's the mangrove. Age, yeah.
Now again, back at this time, no 3 rods, 2 rods only.
Yeah.
Monkey climbers, I can see there, Neville's, and so let's talk about the setup, because obviously everyone's got it on their plate now. Like my son Ollie sitting here, he's lucky, all this new flash gear you get. Let's go back. The rods were
I built myself. They were Northwestern blank, £2 test curve through action, 12 foot. Cork handles on them, which no
50mm butt rings on there.
No 50mm butt rings. I would think they're probably about 30mm butt rings on them rods. 2 rings on the butt section as well. One up near the spigot, as you can see. One just by the alarm. Nice rods.
Still got them now?
I haven't. No, they got sold on. I think. Be a shame. I mean, pretty whippy, I'd have thought.
But it's like I've still got original set of Leslie's at Luton's at home, and I've kept them, and I think my son Ollie was using them for a little while.
Yeah, actually. I do have a few sets of old rods, but them ones I don't have. But they're so soft, lovely playing rods.
Yeah.
You very rarely pull hooks out of. I think that year on a match, I only lost one fish. To a hook pull.
Good, lovely soft action rod, as you said.
Balanced tackle, isn't it?
Yeah, and you got your Cardinals there as well. As you
mentioned,
set
of Cardinal clips. 57s there.
And line, out of curiosity?
Line would have probably been something like £15 big game, something like that, I'd have thought.
Yeah.
Or £11.
Was that sort of diver sensor then as well was another?
It'd have either been that or it'd been £11 seal cast.
Yeah. Okay,
which was strong.
And your Neville's
on
there as well, and a monkey climbers.
There's some old Neville's, monkey climbers, all the stainless and that there, like butt rests, back bank stick and buzzer bars, all be Neville stuff. He's a local, and he's you can't have Neville alarms without having Neville bank sticks.
They go hand in hand, don't they? Very nice. Okay, next slide, please, sir. Oh, sun's out, guns out, Nigel.
Yeah.
It's the hair. It's like a COVID haircut.
Well, I was I wasn't trying to look like Mickey Gray in that, but no, the hair there, that was a bit more of just being
fishing all the time rather than going down the barbers.
This was probably a month or so after I started, mid-August actually. I remember it was I think about 15th, something like that of August. You always get a meteors shower, didn't you? Loads of shooting stars. Every year you get it. And that night in the mangrove, I remember sitting up most of the night watching shooting stars, and I had 4 fish, but obviously I've been on the match like 5 or 6 weeks, pretty much every day of the week. Yeah. And weekends going out partying like you do as a young man and raving, stuff. Raving. But the haircut wasn't important at the time, so it was growing a bit. And I hadn't long got to the lake actually. I think that evening I'd just set up and I caught 2 like that, and that fish called piss flap straight away. So I was looking pretty clean there and a bit fluffy rather than matted down grease look. So I look like a bit of a I like to look at my eyes there.
Yeah. You've been out raving.
I think I might. Well, it was a Monday every weekend. No, I was probably a bit worried about the chap who was taking the pictures.
More concern over who's going to get thumb over it or something.
Yeah, well, it weren't digital cameras.
Well, no, this is what I'm saying, because like say anyone watching this probably think, that's a quite
grainy looking picture. Film, that would have been.
But back then, you had your photo of your fish, and you're like, oh God, I've got, you finish your session, you go down to the snappy snaps or whatever it was, or wherever the supermarkets, and get your photos, and you're waiting for them to come out, and sometimes they're blurred. Cut the tail off of your finger, someone's finger over the front. But they're so lucky nowadays to have digital photography, and like walking around a lake, you go, I had that one last week, and you can show them a picture. Whereas, it was different then with film. Getting it all developed, and it was different era, totally different era.
But that was that fish there was the first of a good session in the mangrove night at the shooting stars. Really,
one to remember.
I think. Jamie Smith might have joined us during that session with some of his mum's homemade elderflower wine. So I think one night he might have got a bit loud.
A bit pissed.
Yeah.
Right, next slide, please, sir.
Yeah, that's
this
the
is
other
piss
fish.
flaps.
Yeah, obviously that was a bit later in the evening. We've got the old jumper on there. That jumper, you'll notice, goes through quite a lot. There's 2 jumpers. There's one.
Was it your lucky jumper?
Well, that's an old one. One of my mates who was in the Paragus give us. It's like a burgundy top, and that become a lucky fishing jumper. So, yeah. And there was a knitted jumper that my mum had knitted for me. I don't know whatever happened to that. But I was.
Why was that fish called piss?
I do not know. I think there might have been due to spawn damage or something once. There might have been a bit of skin hanging off it or something. I don't know.
It's a lovely looking old.
It's a lovely old car.
Take the mick out of it. It's a very original old looking mirror, isn't it? Look at it.
Again,
lovely.
someone probably Mickey Gray's era or something, say era. He's not much older than me, to be fair, but he'll probably be able to tell you the story behind the naming of that fish, or he'll know someone who would someone like Robin Dix or something.
Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, this is the last one, I think, on the match lake, isn't it, Al?
There's a couple.
There's one more. Sorry, after this one, I apologise. And
that's just a classic mid-20 match lake cod, as they'd call them, but that was very mint.
So this was a slightly more recent stocking back then. Than
that's a newer fish to the old Fish and Piss Flat. That I think they were stocked in the 70s or something like that. These fish, but that's what they called a match lake. Match lake carp, which would have been of the same lot of your Arthur tail, heather and jumbo and that sort of group of fish. Those ones obviously got moved.
Did that happen a lot on that complex? Did fish get moved around?
I don't think it happened a lot. Again, anglers like Robin Dix, they can tell you the history and that of who moved what. I don't think there was a lot moved, just one or two from, dropped in the car park and the pads lake,
Because Lee Valley used to be like, sometimes
it goes on everywhere, doesn't it?
You like one fish would come out of one lake, next season it come out of another one.
Well, I won't name the lake, but down on the coast there's a lake I fish down there, and it seems that every fish in the lake's named after the lake it come from. It goes on everywhere, doesn't it? And some of the best lakes,
I don't think it's as bad nowadays because of digital technology. People saying there's no way that could have got in there through floods, but every fish is pretty much.
Well, this is you could get political about it. This is my argument, that when you have no publicity waters, that they're at risk because they don't want their fish publicised, and so they're not documented. So everyone don't know what's what. Or, the only people who will know is the ones that have fished their lake. That if you allow publicity, it does actually protect your fish in a way. Everyone knows where that fish is or whatever. But,
I mean, rules are rules, and if there's no publicity, I've fished plenty myself. I'm on one this year that exactly the same, and they're the rules, and you stick to them. But sometimes a lot of people leave these syndicates, and then
they've got no worries with you, though, have they?
No, because I don't catch none. Right, next slide, please. Is this the last one, Al?
It's not.
We've got one more match.
I call lots more. That's just
no. We've sort of cherry picked, shall we say? Something. Yeah, this is another lucky jumper I'm taking.
That's the typical, as they would say, that is a proper match lake cod. It's not a particularly nice looking fish, but it was a big fish at the time. I think that's a 29 pounder, probably a PB for me at the time. That would have been. But there's a lucky knitted jumper before knitted jumpers became carpy. I think my mum knitted that for me. I'd love to have it now, just like, I don't know whatever happened to that. It might have got hung in a tree to dry out after capture and just went.
Disappeared.
I don't ever remember throwing it out. It might have just dissolved.
That's probably part of a bird's nest now. But
jeans as well, you notice the jeans there.
Oh, I can't fish in jeans.
It's like fishing in cardboard, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm a joggy bottom man, and I see a few of my mates, like James,
I'd imagine
all the time. It
you struggle with
oh, got it cold. Oh,
a little bit more stretchy, the old jogging bottoms are, aren't they? You want to start eating salad, mate.
Well, I did, and we won't talk about that because I'm sort of burping it up now. But okay, next slide, please. That's a raving jumper.
Yeah, well,
all day long.
Yeah, a bit later in the year. That's so needed a hood. It's all right with one of me jumpers over the top. It calmed it down a bit, but
the maroon jumper's still underneath that.
Yeah, although the match lake fish were very bland, and sometimes they didn't look too good with certain lights, taking photographs of them and that. But when you got a Larry top on like that, it can actually make quite a good photo, can't it? So.
Well, they do say I think it's blue as well for commons and other colours.
It'll
show the fish out a lot more, but it's just not carpy to do that now.
No, maybe Gardner should think about bringing out a wardrobe, like a fold down wardrobe.
Jumper now. I'm going to be bringing that one out next. I think that's definitely on the next list of clothing.
Raving tops. Yeah.
And what weight was this one? Sorry, this was.
I think that was the same fish as the last one, I think. I don't know. It's an upper 20 of some description. It's in the book somewhere.
So next one, please, sir. Oh, scaly.
Yeah, scaly. That's that's not drop scale. That's a fish called scaly. That's a very rarely caught match lake fish at the time.
That's a cracking fish.
Because it was actually, for a match lake fish, quite heavily scaled. As you can see there, big cluster in the middle of it and that. That's a special carp, that one. again, the old ravey top there, nice shiny hair. Probably quite greasy actually. I think that was about 4 days into
the sesh. Yeah. So they spun again. This was just all caught. You can see it's been raining in the background there.
Yeah.
This was just another sort of 3 o'clock fish again, was it?
That was actually in the evening. That fish.
Different time of the year. So did you notice
October
it changed?
Time. Yeah.
Summer, more mid-afternoon bites, and then as you progressed later, and the light started dropping.
Well, the area I'd started fishing, which is now called Nigel Swim. Like,
yeah.
Who'd
they name that after then?
I don't know. But yeah, they named it Nigel because I'd done quite a lot of sessions in that swim. Like when it got into the autumn, I'd kept my eye on that area. Again, I wrote about it in the book, and I know most of the swims on the Yateley, people waded out to cast, and because it's like a sandy gravel, you could see that, like the little yellow brick road where everyone walks out.
Yeah.
But that swim hadn't been fished all year.
So you chose it.
So
for
I
that
sort of
reason,
chose it, and I'd had a lead about it, and there's deeper water and a bit of silt out there, and I thought that's a good autumn area.
Yeah.
Sort of. But yeah, when I started fishing it, every bite I had from that swim was pretty much at night. But that one was an early bite. That was sort of in the evening, probably about 9 o'clock in the evening, just into dark. I caught that fish.
That's a lovely fish, that one. Amazing fish. Have we got another slide on that one? One more there? That's a very unlooking Nigel there as well, look.
Well, that obviously scaly and the 29 before it, them pictures was a build up. Like there's bigger fish coming, like, 28 and a 29 pounder doesn't sound big in this day and age, but then you're hitting the 18 with the match lake, like from that swim, and I was building up. There was 2 30s in the match lake, as I mentioned earlier, Thompson fish and drop scale.
Yeah.
All the munchkins and that were saying you're going to catch drop scale because he hadn't been out, and I was like, don't pressure me like that. I'll be happy at Thompson's because it's a 30 pounder, realistic target, on a good 20s water. And the night of the flood we mentioned earlier, that flooded people's cars out, and I hadn't parked my car, and blah blah blah, all of that. That was the fish I had in the sack there, which was my first 30.
Special moment. Always remember your first.
October the 15th, 93, I think that was 33.9. Special fish, drop scale. You can just about make it out on the top of the dorsal line, the drop scale there.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, that was it's quite strange really, because everyone was panicking about the cars being flooded and getting out.
You were more worried about the fish.
John Locke would come down with his Land Rover and pulled a few people out, and all that was going on. And it was a case of almost like a kid in the class putting his hand up for a wee, saying, "Could someone come and photograph this fish for me?"
Don't worry about your motors. I just want to photograph
it's a strange day that was. But
so first 30,
an eventful first 30. The whole complex flooded.
It's crazy, isn't it? And just quickly, when that flooded, could fish get between lakes? Was it that bad that fish could?
No, they couldn't get between lakes because the banks was quite high. But
okay, so it wasn't that sometimes when
there was a risk that there might have been a few maybe slip in the river, but it was more the level went up about 18 inches on the Match Lake, but the banks were high enough to hold that. There wasn't a worry with escaping fish. There might have been a chance on the other side of the road, but because they're all about the same height. That was a good, pretty much a finale. I think I only caught one more fish out of Match Lake after that, which I think is probably Al's next slide.
Have we got one more?
Which is that one, which will be a repeat capture.
Yeah. And that was a repeat. Was that the one is that the first fish you had?
No, that was
the 26. I was thinking about maybe.
This was a 27 pounder that I caught it a couple of times.
And again, real old looking fish.
But as you can see, it's got the old blue steadfast sort of one-piece onesie suit on there. They were absolutely rubbish, weren't they? Keeping you warm because the wind went straight through them.
Yeah. So basically, this was your last fish out, which was...
This was mid-November.
Mid-November,
okay. All that flood water pretty much shut the Match Lake down.
So did you pull off then? So was that sort of... You carried on for a little while?
Yeah, I carried on for a little while, but you could see it as a no-goer and that. And the Match Lake fishing was just pretty much a social fishing, and the odd one come out through the winter. It wasn't until the back end of the year, sort of February time, the last few weeks of the season, when the odd one started coming out. And I think it was Terry at the time had sussed where they are in a weed bed in front of the 48s.
And a few out, didn't he, as well?
He's well documented in his book, sort of thing, his 40-80 carp, and he was just nicking them on single look baits in afternoon sessions. And something you don't get much of this day and age. He was on to something, and everyone respected it and left him to it. You know, it's like, you know, I could have jumped in there. I had more time on my hands, but you don't do that to your mates.
You know, again,
that was the thing at Yateley back then. Is I think
just left alone to
etiquette.
do your own thing. Yeah, and like I say, something that's still around now, but sometimes it's not, as we all know. You know, so basically that's all the end of your time on Match Lake. Must have felt pretty chuffed, actually.
Yeah,
I walk away with 15 odd fish.
Well chuffed with it.
That's a good start. So then that was like, okay, you sort of pulled away from there around November, maybe the odd little walk around again, the odd session. Still the day of the original close season, obviously. So that made you start thinking about the Cops Lake, which runs just on the back. Did we have a picture of Cops Lake at all? Right, so here we go. This is a picture of Cops Lake.
Yeah, that's obviously a bit of ice on it there, so, you know, to show that I was, you know, walking around it in the winter and stuff, starting to sort of buzz myself up for it.
The difference between Match and Cops Lake, and why you wanted to go to Cops?
Cops Lake's small and it's shallow. Swans can pretty much hit bottom all over it, except for up the channel, Pig Swim channel. The reason I wanted to fish the Cops Lake was because that swim I was fishing, Nigel swim backed onto the Cops Lake, and when I was in there, or the 48s, I quite often saw the lads or photographed fish from the Cops Lake and started thinking I want to fish that.
So you just sat there and thought, do you know what, I'm going to finish my time off on Match Lake now, and on then my natural progression is to go on to Cops.
I mean, this day and age we tend to use the winter to plan the next year's spring attack, summer attack. Back then you used to fish a season out on the lake, so I went back to the Match Lake after a little bit of a break for the winter, done fish the end of the season. You know, obviously Terry was dominating it. There's a few fish being caught elsewhere.
So Terry was fishing this lake at that time?
Terry was fishing both of them, but he was on something on the Match Lake. But it was only after the end of the season that I started sort of really getting to, I need to start sorting my gear out to fish the Cops Lake, so go and get a bit of work and stuff, you know. Because
I remember you saying you realised your old Lafuma had parted on you and given up. You needed to step up the game on this lake because it was weedy. Everything had to be knocked up a notch.
Had to get me old Kevin Mad KM1CF rods out, like 2 1/4, like stiffer.
It should be classed as probably a flop stick, wouldn't it? Crazy.
And get some bait runner reels. You know, just upgrade the gear, new bed chair. You know, like the gear had taken a hammer in the year before, but that was like a closed season job, which is, you know, you get, you know, start building your kit up to get.
You made that money by rebuilding a lot of your mates' rods as well.
Yeah, I used to build a few rods for my mates and that.
You earned the money well on it, and then so did you up your breaking strain, up your hook size on this lake, or was it pretty much the same approach as what you've done on Match?
You know, we started using beefier hooks because these were bigger fish. I mean, the Cops Lake didn't have as many fish in it as a Match Lake. It was a smaller
so how many
lake.
fish in this one, out of curiosity? And this is probably about
Cops Lake we was fishing for, I'm pretty sure there was 8 mirrors in there.
Yeah.
And 4 of them would have been around 30 pound-ish, you know, 30 or 30 plus.
So nearly half the stock were serious carp, yeah.
And if you hooked one, you wanted it in, like you didn't think you'd get another chance on it. Yeah,
okay. And it was very weedy, this lake.
Very weedy, very shallow, and
and
snaggy as well.
Okay, so your approach on this lake, again, you didn't really change much to what you was doing from Match in terms of your rigs and setup?
No, as I boilie fished it. I'd sort of done my own work on it and fancied a swim called the Stilts. Like open water fished it because it was slightly deeper.
So this wasn't close like you're doing last year. You're fishing quite a way out on this lake.
Quite a way out on the Cops Lake. It's about 30 yards.
Yeah, so you still had that catapult sort of range. Yeah. You could do what you've done before on Match and sort of almost fish it. Yeah. In terms of baiting up.
Yeah, very tight, neat sort of trap fishing with boilies. You know, like low pop ups. Stronger hooks were sort of moved off the
So with this one, you come off the bottom baits and more into pop-ups?
Yeah, low pop-ups. Basically, he's going to use a beefier hook like a Maruta Kinru size 12, which their sizes are different. So it probably, I'd say, more of a size 2, something like that. So it's quite a big hook.
Big gate hook.
But you obviously wanted to pop up on something like that, you know.
Yeah. And what, out of curiosity then, obviously, nice to know what sort of, how did you fish your pop-up then? Was it inch diffs? Was it Charles?
No, it was on a braided.
So just your shot popped up on a braided hook link.
Yeah, braided hook link. I think it's silkworm or so. 25-pound silkworm was the thing at the time. Yeah, let's say I chose a swim called the Stilts, open water, and the Cops Lake. Anyone that knows it knows it's like a garden pond. You walk around and you find what you find the fish in there
Find
every
your quarry,
day.
yeah.
They're like, you just watch them like pets swimming around, but they're tricky to catch, like, 'cause they're pestered,
Yeah.
So I just used to bait everywhere you ever saw a carp in there. If you saw one feeding on it, it was a stalking opportunity. But the main sort of dinner table was going to be in the middle of the lake for me at the end of the still.
And it was
spot.
boilie fishing.
Yeah.
So by this time, you obviously touched base that Nash was quite interested in you some months back.
Yeah.
Had that deal come across then, and you then had more access to not having to roll your bait, you had it in a bag ready to fire out, or was you still sort of making your own, or was you managed to get some
at the time again, like, obviously I could get bait rolled for me, so it's a case of deciding what bait to use, and I chose one called Monster Pursuit. Good bait that was. So I got that rolled up. It sort of was as close to what I liked of a bait. Got that with the lobster thermidor flavour in it. And of course, I was really happy that I didn't have to spend all this time rolling boilies in my bivvy,
to concentrate your fishing.
It was nice to have fresh bait each day that you'd rolled, but I worked out, I think on the Cops Lake, I used to mix some boilies in with trout pellets. Yeah. And trout pellets are quite a new thing then in your fishing armour. You used to actually keep them quite secret. Yeah. Like, so people, and if you fired them out, you told people they were maples or something, if they clocked it. But they were quite good at keeping your bait dry in a bucket. Yeah. Because I'm not into hanging your baits in a tree in an air dry bag, but that's a different subject. But that was another edge. I had a lot of, well, not a lot of bait, but I had bait that I didn't have to roll, so I could run around feeding loads of spots on the lake, feeding them poxy swans off on that Cops Lake. They drive you to distraction.
Oh God, yeah, it gives up anyone's patience with bloody swans.
But it's such a small lake, you sort of run around it in 10 minutes, bait all loads of spots up, try and occupy the swans elsewhere to keep them off the open water area,
So obviously you got your bait rolled for you now. You managed to bait up some spots because you got a deal going and whatnot. So, how many anglers on this lake? Being a small lake, was there more competition? Obviously, the other lake, so could get fairly busy on the match. How many of you, let's say full timers, you was doing roughly the same sort of time that you was doing on match? How many full time anglers were fishing out? Terry was dabbling
on the Cops Lake.
On the Cops, yeah.
Well, I started on the Cops Lake about 2 weeks after the start of the season. Yeah, because the start of the season could be busy on there, and I didn't really want to get involved with all that. In that time, Terry had caught what he wanted out of the Cops Lake, a 30-pounder, I think, a fish called slate grey. Yeah, well documented in his first book, and moved off over to the North Lake. So he wanted to catch basil. He decided to go full time, or his dad was going to support him and all that lot. So he thought he was going to use that time to fish for basil. Like, he took a step up across the road, and so realistically, I had the Cops Lake to myself for the week, except for I think on a Wednesday, Guy Slater from Coventry used to come down. So if I got there on a Monday or Tuesday, I knew I could pretty much walk straight into that swim. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was busy at weekends. Like, there'd be a few people.
When you say busy, how busy was busy?
Well, the Cops Lake is probably only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 areas that you'd fish. Right, there was a few more swims, but that's it, banged out if all of them swims were gone. So roughly 4 anglers on the Cops Lake's more than enough.
And did it shut up? Say you've got more than 4 on there. Did it tend to sort of just?
It probably did, but I didn't actually get involved with fishing when it was like that.
Side of things. And how many acres was the Cops Lake?
I would say a maximum of about 4 acres.
Right. Okay. So very intimate
tiny
fishing.
Lake.
Yeah, really intimate fishing. So you're talking around about. How many fish were you saying there was in about 8?
There was 8 mirrors, 8 known mirrors, and there was probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 of these back commons that never seemed to grow in. And there was, I think the biggest
commons were they? Like
Wildy's biggest one was about 15 pound or something.
They sort of stunted above that, didn't they?
Sort of lived under bushes and ate maple peas if they were thrown in,
So out of the target that you had, how many target fish again did you have on there? There was for you.
Well, the one I wanted to catch out of there was one called the Pretty Fish, which is a big one in there. Yep. My main target I really wanted to catch was a fish called Crinkle Tail. Yep. And I just wanted to catch that because I remember seeing it in Rob Maidin's book, or one of his books. Yeah. The Yateley Carp he caught. I thought I want to catch that, And
start getting the old juices flowing.
I think I'm trying to think. The 4 big mirrors was Split Tail, Slate Grey, the pretty one, and Crinkle Tail. and I managed to catch 3 of them in my time on there. Split tail was the one that I didn't catch.
And how many fish in total out of that lake that season?
What that I caught?
Yep.
I caught 4 mirrors out of there in a common.
So you had 5 fish.
Yeah.
And that was classed as a bloody good season on there, wasn't
Well, it was really. I mean, I didn't do a season on there. I'd done about 6 weeks.
Because you had that in about 6 weeks, didn't you? You were saying you'd done all of them in about 6 weeks. So it must have opened a lot of other anglers' eyes up, actually, thinking, crikey, you know.
Well, it's just a case. For me, it was more a case of, everyone was happy for you. There was no jealousy or anything.
Sometimes,
But for me, it was more a case of I'm proving it to myself that I've done what I wanted to on the Match Lake, and I've gone on the Cops Lake. You're getting a bit worried, a bit intimidated. Like, there's not many fish in this lake. Might only catch 1, maybe catch 2 in a year if I'm lucky. They were known to be riggy fish. You could watch them do you, and I did watch them do me on several occasions. The swans drive you to absolute distraction, raving mad. You spend hours setting a real neat trap.
Set right, and then they go and blow
they
you.
Clock you, put one bait in the water. I mean, I could tell you the 80 stories of people deliberately catching the swan with a landing net, and then like one of their mates would sort of gently hold it on the bank to make sure it didn't see him putting bait in, so they could get
blindfold on it.
Yeah, bait. No, it might as well have done, and but they drive you nuts. They actually have you screaming at them, like ruining your rigs.
Puts a lot of anglers off, to be fair.
The other thing is, with a little lake like that, and it's shallow, and there's fish sitting in the weed bed next to your little well where you're setting a trap, you're trying to be quiet as you can, and then the swan does you up.
How many swans are on there, roughly?
Well, usual 2 dominant swans
and then
on the lake.
Another one comes on, and they end up tearing up
they have a
down the
tear
lake.
up. Geese come on, they have a tear. And a lot of it, say that picture there is with weed, with ice on the lake, but a lot of that would have been weed in the summer like that. So your line's laying over the top of it, and
oh god, yeah. One time
it was hard work. And to be honest with you, I was pretty lucky on there. I lost the slate grey on my first session after moving swim from the Royal Box to the Birches. The following week I caught the slate grey from the stilts where I planned to sort of attack the lake.
Revenge, yeah.
Then I think my next fish was a pretty one, the biggest fish in the lake, 34 pound PB at the time.
Yeah.
And I could have walked away then, but I was on to, I was getting bites each session. I was onto it. It's working for me, so I stuck with it, kept the bait going in and that. But I really wanted to catch that crinkle tail. I didn't actually catch crinkle tail from the stilts. I caught it from the oak tree swim to the left, and I watched it. It was, you get all that silky weed, scummy weed that floats up. It's like a raft, and everything dies underneath it.
Yeah.
I couldn't find crinkle tail all summer, and I might have lost it. I got cut off a couple of times in the stilts. It was a bit of a harsh lake. I did lose a few fish on that lake, but I think when that weed sunk in the middle of September, I remember actually seeing crinkle tail coming in and out of Oak Bay, and where that weed had sunk on the bottom, it's like a coral reef, and I was throwing chops in, and I actually got it to start picking up bait, but it wouldn't pick up baits off a little gravel spot. It'd only pick up bait off the weed.
Very little feeder.
These days you'd say chuck a choddy on it, but
at
the time I had to think on my feet of how I could catch that fish, and I'll just come up with back to me running lead rig.
Didn't balance the bait or anything like that?
I put a balanced bait on, but I longer hook link balanced baits, so it'd sink really slow. I think if I remember the running lead, I stopped that running because it would sort of pull down into the weed. So I stopped that running, and I put several bits of putty along the line so they'd all grip like little bridges across silkweed. Just literally dropped it in the margins where I'd got it feeding on chops, and just waited for it to come back out of the weed bed, and hoped that it'd fall for it, and it did.
And that
well, funnily enough, I've got that actual rig there.
And that is that rig, so that's the one from Crinkle Tail.
Yeah. Well, I remember watching it. I mean, it's crinkle tail. I'm trying to think of the weight of it. It wasn't a big 30, it was a low 30.
No, it was just one you wanted to catch.
31.7 rings a bell in my head all of a sudden. But I remember watching it feeding, and that's a fairly big wide gaped hook there, and at the time moving on to these Kinruis, that's a big hook.
Yeah.
But I remember watching it eating off the weed, and I mean its mouth was nearly as big as that cup there, and suddenly my hook seems really small. Like, whether am I going to hook it? All that's going through your head while you're up the tree watching it. And I think actually my mate Dave Crisp would come up to have a cup of tea. He was doing some work in the car park with Ian Welsh, and I think they was relaying the car park. But his day's work had finished, and we sat there. It might have actually been before he's doing his day's work. But yeah, while we sat there eating bacon and eggs on, the rod just hooped round in the rest, and that was crinkle tail on the end. But
and in the space
the swans,
of 6 weeks,
the swans had driven me nuts. I was screaming at them with it. They just ruined everything he'd done. And once I got crinkle tail, I thought, that's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. I moved back to the Stilts Quarter Common the next morning. And that was me done on there. And I actually went back on the match lake for the rest of that year and caught the old fish again. Yep. Repeat capture of that, and that was a 30-pounder, which made it. There was 3 different 30s in the match lake then, and I believe at the time there was probably only one other person who'd caught 2 different 30s out of the match lake. So it was quite nice to be one of those,
Yeah, no, nice little challenge again.
So that that's
nothing to
kind of finished off my year on there, and then. I'm faced with thinking again through the winter. I'm going over to the dark side, the other side of the road. That's the challenge.
Was the next step. Well, we got some photos coming up now. So these are Cops Lake fish.
Yeah.
So this one here is,
I believe that's slate grey. I think. Yeah, looking at his tail. Yes, that was been my first one. Love that was.
And that was 34.
That wasn't actually a 30. That was when Terry caught it. It was 30 pounds an ounce. It was spawned out there. It would have been about 27.
Okay.
The epitome of the Cops Lake with a bracken in the background there. Yeah. You just got to have that picture,
Yeah, so historic.
And a nice haircut as well.
I was going to say, yes, the curtains. It's all about the curtains there, isn't it? Okay, so we got another one on there, please. Is that
would be return?
And this is look at the scum.
Yeah, that's the scum that covered the Oak Bay, but that would have been returning the pretty one, like the big one in the lake at the time, 34 £. A PB for me actually. Nash T-shirt on there. See, flying a flag, all sponsored up there on my way.
Yeah, like it. We got another one on there, please, Alan. Wow,
that's crinkle tail. You can always tell by that hooked top lobe of the tail. Yeah, that was my main target.
And what did she go there when you had her?
I said earlier, 31.7, something like that.
Okay, very nice, mate. Lovely old photo as well.
Like at the time, big fish. That was. I'd only caught a handful of 30 pounders at the time, but they were target fish. That's what was more important, to catch what you wanted. The actual named fish sort of thing.
And it's just what I was trying to explain to my son Ollie. Nowadays it's 40s and 50s and all that, but you go back then. I mean, I was fishing Darrenth in the early 90s before they put a load of French fish in there. And there was a handful of 30s and 20s. I had my first 20 out of there, but that was still, if you had a 30, that was blew you away. There was a finner on the ground. I think we'll say. Yeah. Right, we got another slide there, please, Alan. And this one,
that would have been the old fish again out in the match lake.
Right, and there's obviously when you went back over there again, was it? You had that one. Okay.
Yeah, that's sort of like finished off the year, really.
And then that was the end of the year on there.
Yeah, I mean that was a sort of a bonus capture. I'd have been happy just to catch anything out of the match lake, but to catch another 30, I think that was £30.10 at the time there, which is nice. But the Cops Lake sort of. And, obviously catching drop scale the year before, like I actually caught a tricky one, which was a main target. Sort of, I can do this. And then going on Cops Lake and catching a big one, and one that I really wanted, I'd sort of like, got it in my head that because of going back to Frimley and failing to catch that shoulders as a target, and then walking away and going to Yateley, I was actually at Yateley, I started realising I can do this, so maybe it's time to try and target some of these fish that what inspired me, like your heathers and your basils. Like, could I do it? But I was confident, so I was going to take it on.
I mean, this is what I'm trying to explain to son and things like that. Anything confidence is such a big thing in fishing. If you think you're going to catch, you just do. You sit there thinking, I've got dead rods here. You got to move with a confidence, and So, and that's the next slide we got coming up here. So this rounds us off now.
Yeah, it's just going out the gate, really, isn't it?
This is leaving this gate to that lovely old Granada. Look at that. Yeah. And then that was it. Your time was finished on there, and this is looking to the other side of the road.
Yeah.
So the lake's on the other side. Carp,
North Lake, Pads Lake. Choose which one.
And North is like I say North. So obviously that's another chapter that we'll talk about next time. It's again one I'm really looking forward to, because that's got the real big name fish.
Name fish that have been fished for by big names, that had inspired the likes of myself and Terry and that really. So,
well, that's one we're looking forward to. This whole piece has blown me away, mate. It's been really interesting, and thanks for coming in.
No problem.
Look forward to the next one. Hopefully nights are allowed again soon, because we're sort of coming just beginning of March now. So again, we've probably got 3.5 weeks to get you in here before we lose you. But listen,
I'm
mate,
sure I could spare you some time.
I'm sure you will, mate. But look, listen, thanks for coming in.
No problem.
I can't wait to watch this one again myself. So see you soon. Be seeing you.
Be seeing you. Straight lines.